Hey guys, this is Chauncey from Session Stories, and today I'm joined by the Deadbolt, a Chicago band known for their gritty, heartfelt rock and their DIY spirit. This year, they dropped their sophomore album, Bèau Mondè, a record that's defiant, restless, and full of fire, with standout tracks like I Don't Care If You Don't Care, Promised Land, For the Night, and Porch Light. We're super excited to get into these tracks and learn more about the album, and we're so stoked to have you here today.
Well, thank you very much. That's probably one of the best intros that I've heard since we dropped this album. So
Yeah, of course. So yeah, jumping into it, I went back and listened to your past album, So Pretty and Burnt Out. So I think your first album kind of leans, like from my interpretation, it leans into like maybe like exhaustion and self-doubt. And then while Bèau Mondè kind of feels more defiant, almost like you're pushing back, especially, like with the tracks like I Don't Care If You Don't Care. So just curious, like, do you see the two albums as like different chapters of the same story or completely something else?
yeah, Pretty and Burnt Out was definitely kind of, I don't know, it had some moody, some melancholic tones in it for sure. Yeah, I mean, Bèau Mondè was absolutely like, I think that it's two chapters of the same story for sure. Just,
Yeah.
maybe different seasons, different feelings. But yeah, Bèau Mondè definitely kind of, we were going for, we had a little bit of venom in our spit for sure writing that album, but in a good way. I felt like it just kind of, a lot of energy came out of it, and it's been a really good foot forward for us since dropping it.
Yeah, definitely. I know that. So I know I Don't Care If You Don't Care. That's obviously like one of the more popular songs on the track. So I was just curious, like what the meaning behind that particular track was, because I was listening to it and I was like, I definitely think there's a few things. So I was like, is it a song about protecting yourself from indifference, or is it about like claiming your freedom, or just like curious the story behind that song?
Yeah, I think that it can mean something a little bit different to everybody. When I was writing it, I just kind of like struggled to figure out where the message was really coming from. But I think that at its root, like it really had a lot to do with people's, in going through troubles or trials, tribulations, whatever in life, some people tend to
Yeah.
shut down, and their coping mechanism is to deflect. Like you don't want people around, and everybody's different. But I think it comes from a place of being there for yourself when you're doing that to yourself and your own internal struggle, and then also being there for people that need it but are trying to act too strong or shut you out.
Yeah.
I think that it can take on a couple different meanings, but overall just kind of like showing up and being there for either yourself or people who are trying to endure on their own.
Yeah. And then the album title, Bèau Mondè. So I had to look this up because like I know it's French, but I'm assuming it's French. I'm not sure actually, but I'm like I didn't know what it meant. So I looked it up and just curious, like you get hints of like maybe image and surface of like the glam life, but maybe also kind of like how superficial trends are or how superficial trends can appear. So I was just curious, like what does this title mean in context of the album?
Yeah, so you again hit the nail on the head there. It is French. It was a new term for me. We had kind of the overarching theme. We realized a lot of it was geared toward our endurance to never stop in what we're doing and pursuing, a life in music and making our careers happen, despite any kind of roadblocks that you get from people who gatekeep or the so-called artistic class who gets to decide, what is cool, what's hot shit and what's not, so like it kind of comes from that because I was just searching for different ways to say that. And, after doing some research, like the French back in the day had this class of people who basically deemed what was true art and what wasn't. And it was essentially the Bèau Mondè, like that was the class of people. And in a lot of ways, I feel like that definitely still exists today on a larger scale, probably always will. It's just, it's the higher class of people in the industry or the media that deems what is successful and what isn't. And, us being independent musicians from a city like Chicago, which is a big city, but we don't have the media presence that maybe New York, LA, London have. And we kind of just have to make our own way despite anybody shutting us out. So it kind of comes from that feeling, and anybody can kind of make it their own. Tried to make it relatable even outside of music, because I think it's important that the listener can relate as well, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And another thing I realized is that there is a lot of imagery of fire and flames. So, like, fire shows up kind of everywhere in this album. Sometimes it's warmth, sometimes it's destruction, sometimes it's persistence. So, why does this metaphor or imagery like keep pulling you back? And like, what do you think it means in the context of the album?
That's honestly a really good call out. Kind of had a introspective thought on my end, because I didn't even realize how much I'd pull from that imagery. And I don't know, it could be so many different reasons, just because of how I think I live my own life and burning myself out. And maybe that was what the feeling was coming off of that first album. But I think, like on so many levels in art, religion, music, you name it, I think fire is like one of those themes that just is naturally a part of an extreme side of like a spectrum. I think that it can encapsulate a lot of different feelings. And when we're thinking about something extreme and a lot of energy coming through on an album and emotion, I just feel like that imagery is very powerful. And maybe that's why I keep reverting back to using it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And one thing about your sound that I love is that it's definitely dynamic. So your sound mixes, there's like a bit of like Southern rock grit with, touches of Britpop. Then there's like the 90s alternative. So how do you decide like what direction a song takes?
That's a very good call out. I think early on in our budding careers as musicians, we have that Chicago blues rock background blended with just what I grew up on listening to, which was like Rolling Stones, and definitely heavy influence from bands like Kings of Leon. And I feel like those were some early bands that had me develop my voice essentially, and like what I found familiar and the way that my voice developed. I guess that Southern influence comes from, even though we're from Chicago, Illinois, but I think that bleeds in. But I don't think I can ever change that part of me, because that's just what my voice sounds like. But going into this album, Bèau Mondè, it was definitely, we had more of a concerted effort to write in a certain way. And what influences were kind of blending together during the writing process this time around was definitely some of that 90s alternative, but a lot of that new wave and post-punk sound that's coming out of, Australia, the UK and Ireland. Like a lot of those bands that are kind of hitting it big right now have influenced us in a really big way and kind of changed our sound a little bit. We know we don't sound like them, but we definitely pull a lot of influence from what's going on in those scenes. It just seems really happening right now.
Yeah. And were there any like new influences, musical or otherwise, that kind of guided Bèau Mondè more than your first record?
Definitely that post-punk new wave influence, yeah. I think, just kind of looking back on the soundscape, we wore a lot of hats on that first album. That was a pretty eclectic mix. And I don't think that we carried a lot of super similar sounds over, except for maybe a few songs. But overarching, this was a lot of new territory for us. We had a lot of fun writing it just because of that post-punk new wave sound that kind of creeps through. Again, my voice isn't traditionally in that scope. So we get kind of an interesting mix that I guess is into our own and what this sound is going forward. And we're really enjoying this phase of the band. So it's been really fun writing.
Yeah. And just curious, did any songs change drastically from like the original version once you got in the studio?
Definitely not like insane changes, but we worked with a engineer and producer named Doug Malone here in Chicago. He runs a studio called Jam Deck, and he's worked with some absolute legends. So this guy's pretty tried and true, and we knew he was kind of our pick to click as soon as we met him, because we were really seeking out a true producer for the second album. We really wanted to make an effort to really understand and get an idea of what it looks like to make a truly professional record. And I think songs like Blood and Water, songs like For the Nights, which both of those we had previously released from another studio that we recorded in, and we actually redid them for the album. So that was kind of interesting. And then songs like Porch Lights and pretty much everything, honestly, changed when we got into the studio, because we'd sit down with Doug and, he had a vast amount of ideas after we sent him the demos. And then he'd kind of go and like pull examples of the sounds he had in mind, whether it was like literally making the sound with something he had in the studio, an instrument or some sort of effect modulator. Or if it was like a song off of Spotify, like a deep cut, some band we had never heard of before, or a famous band, and he'd play 30 seconds of it and point out an effect that they were using. And it was a really, really cool opportunity to get to work with him and want to keep that relationship established because he affected our sound in a huge, huge way. And the album, I don't think would have come out nearly as good sounding or cool if we hadn't walked into Doug's studio with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And I know that some songs transform, like obviously like once they're played live. So just curious, like are there any tracks on Beaumont that feel different? Maybe they feel more powerful or even surprising, when they're performed live on stage?
Definitely a yes to that one as well. I think because they kind of take on their own life when we build them into just like the pageantry of what a live set is. And just recently, we had a show in Milwaukee and we opened up with Promised Land, which we've kind of been doing like a long intro that's kind of drowned out with our bass, and it's very rumbly and sounds like thunder before the song starts. And it's also taken on a life of its own in the performance as well, just because we took a lot of liberties with that one in the studio with all the effects and stuff going on around it during the chorus and little things that we added on the side. So we've kind of had to find ways to recreate the energy of that sound. It's definitely come into its own in our live sets. Promised Land is an awesome song to perform. I think Breaks also kind of falls under that category as well. I always felt like that one was going to be a pick to click, and it kind of further solidified with the rest of the band when we started playing it live on these run of shows that we've had this year.
Just to piggyback from that question, is there a particular song that's your favorite to play live?
I definitely think that Promised Land is one of those songs, as well as Breaks. Love playing both of those. Just the energy on it is unmatched for me. The whole album's fun to play, but those two really stick out on our set. I feel like we get the crowd really into it.
Now that Beaumont is out in the world, like what do you hope listeners take away from it?
Obviously, like probably any artist that releases an album, I guess depending on what their goals are, I want people to relate to it. I want people to be inspired by it. I think in the way that we write music, and I think the way I'm positioned as, a musician and a lyricist, I also want it to be cathartic for people. I really want people to feel something deeply. I think that emotion is an extremely important part of why I currently do this. I think the band, would agree as well. The rest of the band, as true musicians, they're great at writing music. They just want the music to be good. They want people to resonate with with it. But I think as a lyricist myself, I think my other motive is like I truly want people to resonate with the meaning behind it, resonate with the feeling and the emotion. I want them to be drawn in. I want them to connect with it, not just, passive listening, I guess. I want it to be cathartic. I think that's probably the best way to sum it up.
Yeah. And what's next on the docket for you guys for 2025? I mean, the year's almost over, but do you guys have any upcoming shows or even upcoming shows for early next year?
We are going to be playing the Salt Shed here in Chicago, opening for Neil Francis and this other band from England called the Heavy Heavy. And that's going to be the biggest stage that we've stepped on so far. Thank you. Yeah, it should be great. It's like a 5,000 capacity venue here in Chicago, and that was a big book for us. So in addition to that, we'll be playing 2 shows in Kentucky, 2 of our favorite places, Lexington and Louisville. And then we're going to have one more that we announce at the end of the year in Milwaukee. But 2026 is definitely going to be an even bigger year for us. We've got some big plans in terms of ground we want to cover, new cities. Eventually, we're working our way up to hopefully getting across the pond to new continents as well. Would love to come to Germany. We know we have some fans. I don't care if you don't care. Also, I should have called out as a great song, and happy that we've had some success there with streaming on Spotify. It's opened a lot of doors for us. So we're hoping to come and meet and play for a lot of the new people and new ears that have taken the time to listen to us. So, we're hungry. We're pretty ambitious about getting out there.
Yeah, I mean, you guys would definitely be very well received here in Berlin. There's like a massive scene for that type of genre. So we're ready for you when you guys are ready.
That'd be cool. That'd be really cool. Love it.
Yeah, so I think those were the main questions that I had for you. But with that being said, are there any final words that you would like to leave your fans and the listeners with?
Anybody who tuned into this or has listened to us at any point in their life, just really appreciate it. We're definitely a smaller band right now, but we hope to be a household name at some point. Hope to come play your city sometime soon. Apologize for the sirens that are probably going off in the background while I'm talking. Um, but yeah, really appreciate you having me on, Chauncey. This was really, really cool that somebody from Berlin would reach out and ask to interview a band from Chicago that's just trying to make their way. So yeah, humbled and grateful and all the above.